I'll get the door.
So, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Elaine Isaak. I'm writing primarily as PC Ambrose these days. So I'm reading today from a novella called Grail Maiden, which is available for audio first table in this format for $5, and also online as an ebook if you are an e-reader. This is a prequel to my Dark Apostle series, which is Elisha Barber, continued in Elisha Magus, and Elisha Rex Volume 3 has just come out this week. Also in the newsroom. They haven't sent me any actual copies of the book yet, so I can't like flash it around. This cover. It's not the end, it's a 5-book series, and I have just drafted book 5. Which is kind of exciting and kind of sad at the same time. So this picks up a scene or two into the Grail Maiden, which is set in 1307. The place is Carlisle, which is on the border with Scotland. And this is essentially the hinge point in history that my series takes off from. So King Edward I, Edward Longshanks, is dead. His son Edward II, who nobody was all really fond of, except possibly Piers Gaveston, has assumed the throne. And Alison, our narrator, is a witch. But it's a secret. Pardon, milady. The young squire bowed before her, and Alison acknowledged him. What is it, Sylvia? His face looked terribly pale beneath the spray of freckles, his eyes very wide. But you've pricked yourself, my lady, he said, impulsively taking her hand upon his, staring down at it as if dazzled by the ring she wore. I carry news from the river, my lady, he told her, skin to skin, in the way of the magi. The witches have come for her. Alison's breath caught. For him to come to her in the hall at such a time was madness. News from the river? What were the magi speaking of tonight? Tell me quick. Prince Edward, King Edward, is dead, fallen in a skirmish with the Bruce. Truly? There's no doubt. He fell in the river, my lady. It was there that he died. Silvio's touch turned chill, and she knew he did not merely carry the message. He had felt the prince's death stir the water, sweeping its truth downstream to any Magus in contact with the water that night. My God. Alison sent him a sense of comfort and gratitude. Aloud, she said, I'll be all right. What was it you came to tell me? She polished a smile onto her face over the shock and dread that swirled through her. I feel rather unwell, he blurted, drawing his chilled hands close and tucking them under his arms. I beg leave to take my rest early. I can send one of the others. Yes, of course, she told her. Thank you for your service, Sylvia. I'll be sure to inform my lord when he is at leisure. Sylvia bowed himself away from her, swaying slightly with an illness unfeigned. To lose Longshanks and now his son, this was the most ill-omened campaign in the history of England, to be sure. What would it mean for the rest of them? Alison could barely breathe, but resisted the urge to cross herself. She alone in the hall knew of the death, and she could never tell how she had found out, lest she and Silvio be known for witches. At the head table, Randall, leaned close to listen to something Hugh, the bastard prince of Edward, who's been accepted as, forgetting my words, has been accepted by Edward Longshanks as his son. You are too kind to them, Eleanor said, her French-accented voice almost a purr. You must learn to treat them firmly, as they need. Surely that boy's father did not squire him to your lord to be let off at the first sign of weakness. I'm sure you're right, Lady Eleanor. But if my previous marriage and my own upbringing have shown me anything, it is that one gains more advantage in kindness than in cunning. How charming. Is that an aphorism of the North? Perhaps it explains how William was able to conquer your people so easily. Whereas the Welsh remain unconquered still, Alison replied, even by you. Eleanor darted a glance to her Welsh-raised husband and narrowed her eyes. What do you mean by that? Sweetening her words with a smile, Alison said, haven't you noticed? Both of our husbands have spent most of the evening enthralled to the portrait of that French princess. Then she broke off, bile suddenly rising to her throat. The French princess, promised to Edward, who now lay dead in a stream in Scotland. She pressed a hand to her mouth. Come to that, my lady, I feel a bit unwell myself. You do look rather pale of a sudden. Eleanor shifted away from her, cupping one hand over her barely rounded belly. Do you suppose it was something you ate, you and that squire both? I sometimes imagine the cooks here are sympathetic to the Scots. You may be right about that, Alison murmured, suddenly and painfully aware that she might be addressing her future queen. But have you been well? No more sickness? Eleanor smiled weakly. None. I think the new physician is much better than the old one. Paris educated, you know. The last one came out of Salerno, but I think their university is failing the rest of that imagination. The two women shared a chuckle as their moment of tension passed, Eleanor taking pride over her pregnancy, casting a pitying look to Allison, who had yet to conceive even one child. Allison accepted the pity, turning away. Physicians knew barely a whit about women, regardless of where they studied, compared to what a Magus learned in her first months of awareness, how to stop her monthly courses, how to speak through the water, how to understand the presence of another, how to use contact and affinity to transform one thing into something else, how to encourage wounds to heal, how to listen from a distance, how to prevent a baby from taking root in the womb. Randall looked 1,000 miles away just now, Hugh leaning on one arm upon the empty chair, the chair that would remain empty until he himself would claim it. If he offered again, this time as king, for Randall to marry that French girl, would he do it? How would he not? He'd have to be a fool not to take such a boon in service to a new king. Allison's heart felt heavy and loud within her chest. It might be another day before the news reached him and Hugh realized what he could do. Longshanks had 2 other children by a French wife of his own, a woman who never matched his first wife in popularity. If she tried to seize the throne for one of her sons, England would become a French kingdom all over again, ruled by King Philip of France on behalf of a boy prince. Hugh, cold, calculating Hugh, might well be the better choice, and Randall would rise with him. A clatter came in the corridor outside, and the great wooden door burst open, and a lone knight stumbled in, breathing heavily. Allison lurched to her feet. Already? Had the prince's sortie been so close that a messenger could have come this quickly? Then the newcomer raised his head, still panting, his dark hair hanging down around a small tonsure, his black and white tabard marked with the red cross of the temple. His great stature alone should have given him away. Sir Robert! But he was in France. A satchel thumping against his side, Robert stumbled up the rough aisle toward the head table, swinging his large head from one side to the next, gaping at the empty chair, his broad shoulders slumped in an instant. Her needlework quite forgotten, Allison followed in his wake. Good Lord, man, you might at least clean off the sweat before you burst in here, Hugh shouted down at the knight slapping the table. At his side, Randall too rose up, forehead creased with worry. I'm sure that Sir Robert has good reason for his appearance. Robert's head nodded, wagging a little too hard, and he swayed on his feet, clutching the shaft of the candelabra towering nearby. Unbidden, unnoticed, Allison stepped up beside him, easing the heavy satchel from his shoulder to tuck under her arm. Then she slipped the goblet from Randall's place and held it out, whispering, With the nod, Robert put out his hand, dwarfing hers, and took the wine, swallowing a few draughts before Randall's face registered his startlement at the transfer of his own drink to his friend. His expression settled back to worry, but with a flicker of annoyance at his wife. I thank you, my lady, Robert breathed. So, what news could not bear keeping for even a hint of propriety? Hugh's bright beard jutted as he scratched his chin. The French, my lords. King Philip has badgered the Holy Father into defaming the knights. He's arresting every Templar in France, seizing the property of the order. There's talk of torture, of... He gasped, took another swallow, and let the goblet slide back into Allison's waiting hand, of burnings for the unrepentant. Burnings? Now there's a show! Randall's jaw took on that hard line Allison so rarely saw, his eyes not leaving the knight's face. King Edward has steadfastly refused to comply, Robert. The Templars of England have nothing to fear. I'm sure that Prince Edward will go forward with his father's wishes. His father's? Robert cast about again, utterly at sea, and Allison wanted to catch hold of his hand and find some way to reassure him. He had ridden hard, all across the land to reach Carlisle, not knowing until now that the king was dead. Edward Longshanks is gone, Hugh supplied. My father passed away of an illness in July, God rest his soul. He fumbled his way through the sign of the cross, a gesture repeated by Henry and Fury. Next time, God should take a Bruce instead. He was ill as well, but he seems to have recovered just fine. Robert's face fell, his hair dangling in sweaty strands, his own hand slowly and carefully forming the sign. His weariness had grown deeper with every moment he stood. He needed more than wine and comfort, more than she could give, more than he would ever accept of her. As for Longshanks' heir, my brother Edward II has ridden off in one last rage before we take our father home to London to be buried. Randall and I are left as honor guard for the dead. This must be a second great blow to you, Robert. Randall gripped his friend's shoulder. Let us find you some food and a place to rest. Sliding back his hair with one hand, rubbing lightly over his tonsure, Robert sighed. No, not until I've prayed for the king, but thank you. I'll be in the chapel. He gave a second bow, longer and more careful this time, flicked a smile at Allison, a slight bent smile, and took his leave, still impressive despite his disheveled state, and the rumpled uniform of his order, the mark of his damnable moment. Arrested the knights and seized their lands. Holy rude! Randall slumped back into his chair, scrubbing his face with both hands. They are wealthy, and Philip could use the funds, Hugh replied dryly. Then he glanced after Robert, his eyes slightly narrowed, and it took no special skill to sense his calculations. My lord husband, Allison blurted, then froze as both men stared at her from the advantage of their seats upon the platform. Hugh's gaze sharp, blue, dismissive. Randall's briefly warm, eternally worried. I must speak with you, my lord. Women, muttered Hugh into his goblet, following this with a snort of laughter. On what subject, my lady? Randall addressed her politely enough. You are welcome to speak with me at any time, of course, he added, attempting a smile. He smiled a lot when they first married, a bright-eyed expression that made him look more boyish than ever. It is not a matter I can speak on here, my lord. She ducked his gaze, her fingers knotting together, the needle stab oozing a drop of blood under her surcoat. Privacy, even between man and wife, was a thing too little to be found in the overstuffed castle. At that, Hugh laughed uproariously. The news from France has made her eager for you, my friend. And here I thought she might be frigid, but the idea of burning seems to have lit a fire in her heart. You should seize the chance. He smacked Randall on the arm. Thank you. By your leave, I think I will, Randall answered, shoving back his chair, offering a curt bow to the bastard prince. In 3 strides, he stomped down from the dais to stand before her, arms folded. Where to, my lady? It seems I am yours to command. Staring at Randall, his face closed and suddenly haughty, his arms crossed to keep her away, his jaw set against whatever she might say, Allison swallowed hard and wanted to weep, to rant, to batter his chest with her weak fists, anything to make him hear her. All these months she was relieved at the distance between them, and now that she needed him, she found him hard and distant as a saint carved upon a steeple. She might at least have been practical about the future and cultivated some sort of cordiality. There's a chamber in the gatehouse, little used, she said, my lord husband, and added a curtsy. Lead on, woman. He swept her ahead of him with one thrust of his arm. Head bowed, flaxen braids sliding from beneath her veil, Allison moved from the hall like a spirit, barely seen, but to be spoken of behind her back, the frigid wife of a popular lord, making him a spectacle before Hugh and all his company. Why not, said Rocinante? Even granted her family's estates and connections, what good was a woman like her to a man like that? Her face glowed fiercely as the great door shut behind him. Randall spoke not a word, but his steps rapped down after her, down the stairs, between the tents of the knights and their entourages, out to the gatehouse. Overhead, clouds streaked the stars, obscuring in ragged looms the lights of the heavens. The guards below let them pass up the stairs to a narrow chamber alongside the watchman's room. A table and a couple of benches stood to one side, while a tall bed filled the end of the room. Randall sat on the bed, pointedly so, his bearing angry, his expression so far from seduction that Allison might have laughed if she had not so felt like weeping. She turned from him, setting down the satchel she'd taken from Robert to pick up one of the benches by an end and drag it closer. He half rose as if to help her, but she dropped it into place before he could offer and settled onto it. Her fingers worked together again, like strands of silk too tangled to come free. Now that she had him here, she had no idea what to say, how to move him. Robert was his friend. Many of the Templars were. Surely he would need little convincing to convince Hugh to make the right choices. What is it? Randall demanded, and Allison flinched, yanking her hands apart, sliding them into opposite sleeves. Forgive me, my lord husband, I shouldn't. I was too hasty back in the hall. Hasty. Indeed, and bold as well, and now I've come, you speak not a word to your intent. Christ on the cross, woman, what do you want of me? Startled by his ferocity, Allison found the tears beginning to spill. She forced them back, drew them back with all the strength of her will and of her magic. They were a woman's weapon, weak and foolish. She pressed her hands into her eyes as if thinking, please, my lady. His voice came again, this time at a whisper. I have seen you in all your haughty grace, all of your cold honor. I've seen you weep in the bed beneath me in spite of my care, and never have I seen you so distraught as now. Tell me what you will, my lady. I am listening. Very slowly, Allison lowered her hands and straightened her back, finding him leaning forward, elbows on knees, watching her intently, as no one had ever watched her before. I must beg a boon of you, my lord. No more than I think that we do in any case, she gave a nervous chuckle, but you may not know the urgency of it. Very well, he said, shifting back again, still watchful, but more cautious. What is your boon? Mercy upon the Templars of England, she said. The furrows returned to his brow with a spark of incredulous laughter. Mercy? On the Templars? Just who do you think you've married, my lady? I have no power over these things. You must ask it of Edward, though his dark glance slipped away. I think he withholds from action against them, less from mercy than from... But he did not finish the sentence. Cowardice, she wondered, or fellow feeling? Some of the knights, like Prince Edward himself, were said to favor the company's men. But the prince was dead, and she had to convince Randall without revealing that critical fact. I can't, she said, too quickly, drawing his eye, then hurried on to cover her mistake. I'm only a woman, and he has little reason to listen to me. But you have influence. Hugh listens to you. Surely you can influence the princes, she stammered, then shook herself, beginning the magical process of attunement, struggling to find her balance again. Hugh listens to me. We're cousins. We were squires together for a time before he went up to Longshane's household, and it was he that brought me into it. But I barely know Edward. He shrugged, letting his hands fall into his lap. You interrupted us for this? To ask me a thing I cannot give? Are you quite well, my lady? He tipped his head to study her. Then his lips went still, a hard, straight line. You're worried about him, aren't you? Months he's away, and you never even speak of him. Then all he must do is ride in all covered with sweat, shaking with fear, and leap to his defense. My God, do you think me blind? Randall shoved to his feet, raking his hands through his hair, turning sharply from her, the solid strength of his back stiff as iron. Then with a snarl, he slammed his booted foot into the bedstead. Wood cracked. Allison leapt up at the sound, knocking over her bench, nearly falling. When he had spun about to face her, he caught her arm, pulling her back to her feet, staring into her face, breathing hard. Do you think me blind? He repeated, soft and severe. Allison shook her head slightly, tears spilling over at last. The sense of his resentment flowed through their contact, rushing down her arm, making her tremble with the strength of the emotions he held back from her. He is your friend too. I know it worries you. Worries me? He shook her slightly, his eyes flared. Indeed, he is my friend. He has been, long before I knew what he meant to you. And there it was, beneath his anger, beneath his hurt, the sharp, hot thrust of something else entirely. There is nothing between us, my lord husband, she said, very carefully. I know it. For his sake, if not for yours, he takes his vows very seriously. He always has, she whispered. Has it always been so for you? Even with your first husband, did Robert come between you? Allison stood before him, ashamed. Her husband was no fool. How had she thought she was concealing her emotions? Her own mother, who taught her the ways of the Magi, would be disappointed in her failure. But then, her own mother had acquiesced to an arranged marriage for herself, then gave Allison away, first as a child, then again to the first man who came asking, though at least it took a long time in negotiation before her mother accepted Randall's suit. She took a deep breath and gave him the truth. He deserved that, at least. I was 14 when my parents betrothed me to Henry, she murmured, then shook her head. Henry was large, loud, brutish, very nearly the opposite of level-headed and thoughtful Randall, worlds away from the chivalrousness of Robert. She gave a shudder, wrapping her elbows in both hands, hugging herself, staring at the toes of her satin slippers where they peeked from beneath the hem of her gown. I hated him, what he did, every time he touched me, every time he took me. I don't know if you can, if a man can understand what it is to be a woman, a girl, really. She gave a shake of her head, her braids tossing. Randall's jaw took on that hard line. It must have been awful for you. One night, another deep breath, and she lifted her chin to meet her husband's gaze. I decided to run away from Henry. Robert was a young squire then, and I barely knew him or any of the other men in the household. I couldn't go on foot, not far, so I fled to the stables, and I saw Robert there, tending the horses. I asked him in the name of Holy Mary to help me escape. He didn't ask what my trouble was. He didn't argue with me or try to hold me. He just saddled me on a horse. Tears streaked her face again as she looked into the past and she flicked them away with her fingers. His own horse, I think. He's too honest a man to steal, even on behalf of a lady. So I rode out, but I had barely gotten to the moat that surrounded our manor before Henry called after me, drunk, furious. I could hear him shouting at me from the rampart, and then I heard him fall. She wet her lips, but Randall said nothing, his hands lightly held, head cocked, regarding her with absolute absorption. I turned back immediately. I hated him, but I didn't want him to be hurt. His neck was broken, Randall supplied. I had taken on the management of a manor nearby. I used to pay calls at Henry's all the time. I heard about his death, that he'd gotten drunk and staggered out on the ramparts. Not the rest. He nodded slightly. Robert rescued you. Of course you cared for him. Sniffling, wiping her eyes, Allison nodded miserably. I went back to my family and barely saw him. He was elevated to knighthood a year or two later and joined the temple almost immediately. I wish I had known. Randall traced a scar on the back of his hand. You wouldn't have married me, she supplied. With a violent slash of his hand, Randall said, Don't be a fool, woman. If I had known Henry was hurting you, I should have insisted on the king's intervention. For a moment he stared at her, breathless, his dark gaze shifting over her face, his hand falling into a fist. Then his hand spread, the slightest grim smile returning to his lips. It is ridiculous, my lady wife, that our first real conversation should begin with you beseeching my aid, for the man that you love. His voice fell upon her, rough and rigid as the bedboard he had cracked with his anger, and she flinched, expecting at any moment that anger to be fully upon herself. She bowed her head, her cheeks flaming, the heat battling with the cold of her heart and of her trembling hands. I will help Robert, of course. I'll do what I can for any member of the order, but really, I have no power here. I am a lesser son, my lady. It is only the lands you brought to the marriage that give me any standing at all. That, and Hugh's friendship. Hugh's friendship gave him more power than he knew, and Allison struggled with her secret knowledge. Randall believed she asked him only because of her feelings for Robert. Even if he had seen that calculating look on the future king's face, he would not know how close indeed that danger lay. Hugh would need money to consolidate his power if he would claim the throne, money to hold off the Scots, to rebuild the border, to woo the baron's support. Robert and his order represented a harvest of lands and gold that a man like Hugh could only dream of. I've not made a great effort to cultivate Prince Edward's favor, not in that way, he added dryly, but I could do so. You've gone gray again. I did say that I didn't want that sort of favor from the prince, he said, with a touch of that humor she recalled from the early days of their union. I believe what I told to Robert, that Edward II will uphold his father's defenses of the Templars. You ask what is not needed from a man who cannot provide it, and on behalf of a man who would not approve of her involvement. Allison searched for a way to overcome Randall's resistance, to convince him of the urgency of her request, now, before word spread and he became so embroiled in Hugh's scheming that he might go along with the bastard's wishes, even to the detriment of the Templars. She had no sway over him, and knew of only one course that might show the need. Something has happened, something known by only a few, a thing that will change our realm forever. She swallowed. Please believe me, my lord husband, Edward is dead. He nodded slightly. In July, she put out hands out to stop him. Prince Edward, Edward II of England. He fell in a skirmish with the Scots. What? He bolted to his feet, catching her shoulders. But that's... How have you heard this and we have not? Then his eyes flared. That boy who came to you in the hall, he told you, didn't he? He should have announced it to all, or you should have. What's the meaning of this? And with his words went any hope of concealing Silvio's involvement. All this time she thought her husband barely noticed her when he wasn't trying to get a child, and now, to find he'd been watching her, it made her nervous, self-conscious in a way she had not been before. I cannot tell you how he knew, just as he could not tell Prince Hugh. Let us say he is a visionary, but one whose visions so often come true that I have learned to heed them. He tells me that Edward fell in battle with the Scots, that he fell into the river more than a day's ride hence. The news will come, my lord husband. You must believe me. Until lately, Randall answered, I've had little reason to doubt you. His hand slid from her shoulders, folding across his chest, his boot heel nudging the broken board. What might a woman say on behalf of her layman? He isn't, she shot back. And you know it. You just said so yourself, that he would never. But in your heart, you wish he were. By God, lady, it is your heart that makes it so. I thought I knew you, even to suspecting this. He waved his hand at her, and Robert's satchel brought her by her own hands. But how can I know what lies you might invent? You would not deign to use a woman's wiles upon me, not even in our own bedchamber. You would not use them now. What is left to you but such an outrageous lie? And what do you think I can do with it? Extract a promise from Hugh to leave the Templars and their lands alone? Allison's heart thudded with the realization that she might well be pushing him further away, further toward Hugh and the French princess, further even from Robert, who had so long been his friend. In trying to aid the knight, she might well be the cause of his destruction. She sank onto the bench once more, shaking, almost wishing she could touch him, use her magic to influence him. But to reach him for now, after his accusations, would only make her all the more an adulterer, if only in her heart. You may freely call me a liar and believe it so. In time, you'll hear the truth and then believe it. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she forced herself to face him, to imagine what he might say. Prince Hugh, I care not for myself, my lord husband, but imagine that what would be if what I say is true. Prince Hugh would claim the crown at Edward's death, would he not? And then? The Bruce returned from his illness stronger than ever. Slaying the heir of Longshanks will make him stronger still, even if he cannot face our entire army. If Hugh must race to London to seize his power, he cannot afford to leave the border as it stands. He will need armies. The Holy Father has already given his blessing to the seizing of Templar lands. Do you think that he would let them be? You, my lord, know him better than anyone. Ask not what I am capable of. I'm only a woman. But Prince Hugh, what might he do to secure the crown? She wet her lips, gazing up at him, a towering figure, once more the distant saint, but this time listening, scowling into her plain. Believe me a liar, believe me faithless, feckless, and cold, my lord husband, but do not let your feelings about me obscure your own judgment. You have many friends among the Templars, and they will need a voice at the new king's ear. Randall's dark hair swung forward, shadowing his face. You keep more faith with me than I believe, lady. If you think my voice could have such power, I do, she breathed. I do believe it. She did not have to like the man to know his strength. Talking sense was indeed among them. He straightened and spread his hands at last. Best sleep with the ladies tonight. I have not the heart to have you close. So saying, he turned and strode away, his boots rapping down the stairs as he left her behind. Would he speak out for the Templars? She did not know. But she did not think he was the sort of man to allow Robert and his companions to be tortured or burned for jealousy. Her eyes fell to the cracked board, broken by his fury when she admitted her love for Robert. What made him most furious? That he was merely cuckolded by his own wife? Or that it should be his own dear friend that she loved? Perhaps she did not know Randall even as well as she believed. Robert, too, must be warned of what was coming. She pushed off from the bench, took up the heavy satchel, its weight bearing down her arms as if it carried so much more than a night's traveling with him, and walked down more slowly in her husband's wake. Sleep with the ladies, not an unfamiliar state, but one that often marked those ladies whose husbands' beds were warmed by someone else. Another humiliation atop her hastily dragging him from the hall. Hugh and the rest of the men would cheer Randall's forsaking her. She thought again of the French princess, now lacking a betrothed, and wondered if Randall had thought of her as well. He could give up Alison's lands and titles in exchange for something better, even did it not involve a comely new wife. Perhaps more willing than the first. Politics, not personal. Randall had little personal investment in her as a wife, merely in the prestige she brought him. The chapel stood aside by the kitchens and joined with them along a passage to the keep, where Randall likely returned to take his wine and the rowdy suggestions of his comrades as to what he and his wife had been doing in their absence and why he returned alone. When she found the chapel door standing open, a few candles lit around the altar. Robert was already rising, crossing himself, his back to the door, swaying with exhaustion, setting a hand on the wall of the narrow room and giving a sad shake of his head. Robert, are you finished at prayer? Straightening, Robert tugged down and smoothed out his tabard, then slowly came to the door, ducking his head a little to emerge into the corridor before her. Aye, lady. There shall be more later, no doubt, but I pray that God and Longshanks both will forgive a man his hunger. At the word, at the sight of him, at the scent of sweat and leather, Alison's belly tightened. I think that's about all we have time for. Thank you so much for coming. Again, it was from Grail Maiden. You can catch me in the viewers room. I'll actually be down there hanging out at the Broad Universe table, and I will be on various other panels and things throughout the day. Tomorrow I'll be part of the Broad Universe reading. I know some of you are Broad Universe fans. We'll be, I think, actually right back here at 11 a.m., and I'll be reading a complete short story of a completely different time.